Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have a great show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Once again, we have all of the latest for you coming out of Israel and Gaza, and the risks of that igniting a broader war is what we're starting our focus on today. We also have a little bit of movement in terms of humanitarian aid and the strikes that Israel has been committing on Gaza, hitting very close to home for Justin Amash, former congressman. We'll bring you that as well. And there's some new polling showing how the American people are viewing all of this. And I have to tell you, I was a little surprised by it.
So, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, the details and the divides and all of that are very interesting to get into. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what we know about what the future might look like in Gaza. A lot of question marks there right now, something the U.S. has been pushing Israel on. We also have some updates for you out of Trump world. Sidney Powell and Trump-aligned attorney Kenneth Chesebro have both pled guilty, seeming to flip, promising to testify for the prosecution. So we will take a look at what that means. And Dave Chappelle making some controversial comments, I suppose, about Palestinians and big audience reaction, big fallout from that. So we'll tell you everything we know about that as well.
I'm excited to see it. I just wanted to say before we started, thank you to everybody. People have been taking advantage of our focus group discount, but more importantly, we've just been getting so many nice messages from so many of the premium subscribers and others to be able to support work like that. So it's something we're genuinely trying to do here, which is different than everyone else. We put the full thing out as a podcast and on our YouTube channel if you want to go and take a look. Next one coming is going to be Independence. We're working on it right now, and if you can help us out with that, we would deeply appreciate it. But we're going to start with the news, as Krystal alluded to, about the fear of a broader war involving the United States, which is sweeping Washington. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. This is from an inside report of Axios. Headline, quote, "Behind the curtain, rattle U.S. government fears wars could spread." What they point to is that multiple officials inside of the White House said that this is, quote, "the heaviest, most chilling week since President Biden took office just over 1,000 days ago." And what they basically point to is the very basics of what we've already laid out here, which is that the response to the terrorist attack now at this point is seriously embroiling policymakers in fears of what comes next. Because it's not just about whether the situation can be contained to Gaza and Israel. Is Lebanon going to join this war? Is Hezbollah going to join this war? If so, then what? Is Israel going to bomb Iran? If they bomb Iran, is Iran going to retaliate against America? And then the United States, by supporting Israel, are we now inviting, jihadists to attack us through anger in the Arab world? And on top of that, what about the Iranians? And this has already come. I brought everybody the news on Thursday, Krystal, about the United States being attacked, on multiple bases in Iraq and in Syria. One of our civilian contractors actually died of a heart attack during the attack. But worse, really, is that we are officially now engaging Iranian proxies in Iraq and in Syria, and then also in off the coast of Yemen, where the USS Carney, a guided missile destroyer, was engaged in an hours-long shoot-down of multiple drones and missiles, which they say were headed towards Israel. So all of this is just igniting fear of this is before the so-called invasion has even begun. This is before, the ground, hand-to-hand combat, which is anticipated, is happening. At the same time, in fears of a bigger conflict with Iran. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is actually, in my opinion, the most significant piece of news from the U.S. military, not the carrier groups, not any of the other stuff. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has ordered additional forces to the Middle East, including the deployment of a terminal high-altitude area defense system, as well as additional Patriot batteries. Now, as Lucas Tomlinson here from Fox News aptly points out, Hamas and Hezbollah, they don't have ballistic missiles. Only Iran does. So, Krystal, the moment I saw the THAAD missile defense system being deployed to the region, I was like, okay, they are very, very seriously considering this. Just so people understand, these are the types of things that we deploy against North Korea and against very advanced military. So the idea that we would immediately deploy this system to the region, in addition to the Patriot missile defense systems, which the Saudis have used in the past against the Houthis, tells us that they are extremely concerned about a broader war, not with Hezbollah, not against terrorist groups like Hamas, directly with Iran. You don't do it otherwise.
Yeah, that is the big concern here in Washington, and something obviously we need to be concerned about as well, because this is an incredibly fraught, dangerous situation. That was supposedly the point of President Biden's trip to the Middle East, was trying to dissuade, trying to deter other actors from getting involved here. Also, while standing unequivocally beside Israel, apparently trying to talk behind the scenes to Netanyahu. There's reporting this morning that the U.S. has become more insistent on delaying that ground invasion. They are putting it, the way they are urging it is to try to deal with negotiating on the hostages before they push forward with the ground invasion. But this is just an incredibly, incredibly dangerous, chaotic situation. And if we zoom out even from, the immediate threat of a broader war and how that might implicate the U.S., how we might end up getting involved. And again, we talked about how they've already laid out the legal justification that it's not like they'd be asking you or me. They wouldn't even be asking Congress before committing troops if we did go in that direction. There's also the broader geopolitical picture of how this interacts with, hey, this isn't the only, war that we are somewhat involved with. You also have what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. And you have had attempts from the Biden administration to try to charm the global South. And they are looking at the situation in Gaza and Israel's relentless attacks. By the way, there was another massive barrage of missiles fired into Gaza overnight in a brutal assault on Gaza City in particular. They're looking at this very differently than U.S. policymakers are, and they see a massive amount of hypocrisy. New York Times actually reporting on this morning, and the view not only from Palestinians, but from the global South more broadly. They quote a Ramallah-based Palestinian political commentator who says when the war first broke out in Ukraine, Palestinians were actually elated by the tough stance taken by Western capitals against one country occupying another's land. But then they go on to say, it seems that occupation is only bad if the guys who are not on your side are doing it. So China and Russia, of course, taking advantage of this situation, consolidating more support among the global South. Countries like India trying to figure out how they are going to navigate, a complex situation for them as well. But, the disparate views of occupation, depending on whether it is Russia, our adversary, or Israel, our ally, is once again exposing the one consistent of U.S. foreign policy, which is our hypocrisy.
Well, yeah, and that is why the entire time, on Ukraine, I was like, look, the point, this whole democracy, autocracy, and all of that, obviously it falls apart at a cursory glance of U.S. interests, which is why the best way to conduct U.S. foreign policy is to talk about what's in it for us and does it benefit us to go into the net effect of how much we are funding this. That's the best way and always has been in order to conduct yourself as a state. However, here in Washington, policymakers and others twisting themselves into knots to try and justify why, if Israel were to be embroiled in a larger war, why it is worth actually the United States not going to war with Hamas, not going to war with Hezbollah, directly going to war with Iran. For a perfect example of what real bipartisanship looks like here in Washington, let's put this up there on the screen. Senator Lindsey Graham was in Tel Aviv yesterday with 10% of the U.S. Senate, as he so aptly noted. He says, I saw things today I never thought possible. On Iran, quote, we are watching you. Destroying Hamas is non-negotiable. I actually find it a bit funny that Cory Booker is there because he was actually in Israel during the attack. So does that mean that he left Israel after the attack, flew back to Washington, and then flew back to Tel Aviv just to prove how pro-Israel he is?
Wherever there is a camera.
The thing is, let's keep this photo up here because this is important. This people, Susan Collins, Chris Coons, you've got John Thune, number 2 Republican in the Senate, Blumenthal from Connecticut, Cory Booker, Katie Britt from Alabama, Lindsey Graham. The point of this is just to show people that is a very good ideological representation of where most people in the Senate are. And so when we look at that, we can understand that war with Iran is very much on the table. And that's especially highlighted if we put this Haaretz up on the screen. An Israeli minister, actually the economy minister, said that, quote, if Hezbollah does choose to open a front in the north, Israel will also attack Iran. Iran's plan is to attack Israel on all fronts. If we realize that they intend to attack Israel not only on all our fronts, we will then hit the head of the snake, Iran. He said in an interview with the Daily Mail. He also threatened that opening a front on the part of Hezbollah would result in Israel, quote, wiping it off of the face of the earth. All of this comes with pretty significant military activity on that northern border, which for some reason the media doesn't seem to report responsibly. I mean, we've had multiple IDF soldiers killed. We've had multiple airstrikes all across of the northern border of Israel. We've even seen an evacuation by all citizens, the United States included, urging our people, get the hell out of Lebanon now. You don't do that unless you think broader hostilities are going to happen. Not just us, many other countries that are in the region. And we're watching, Krystal, as probably the most the actual like military to military capabilities happening so far pre-invasion, it's all Hezbollah and Israel in terms of, or not even just Hezbollah, Iranian proxies in terms of their much more advanced weapon systems, and that's what really we should all be afraid of.
Yeah,
I think.
There's no doubt about it, and just because perhaps the U.S. is not interested in a war with Iran, they understand it might be biting off more than we can really chew, does not mean that we don't get dragged into this conflict. These things take on a life of their own. And so when you have the Biden administration, I mean, they're not willing to use any of the considerable leverage that the U.S. has to constrain Israeli actions to try to, number one, avoid civilian casualties. Number two, perhaps even more critically, to try to avoid this broader war. And then you've got a psycho like Lindsey Graham leading this delegation of senators into Israel. I mean, recall some of the comments that we played that this man said. He's like framing this as a holy war and actively, effectively calling for World War III. That's his position. And you've got 10% of the United States Senate, Democrats and Republicans, quote unquote liberals and conservatives, standing shoulder to shoulder with this man who has long been clamoring for war with Iran, I might add. And you come to see very quickly what a precipice we are on and how quickly this could spiral out of control.
Yeah, that's right. And Martyr Made, who we mentioned before, Daryl Cooper, does that podcast with Jocko Willing. He hopefully will be joining us on Thursday. Let's put this up there on the screen. I thought he did a really good job of laying this out. When we say war with Iran, it just sounds like words, but it's not. And as he points out, quote, a war with Iran would have to be all or nothing, meaning that a draft would probably be necessary. We'd launch every Tomahawk we have in the region and it wouldn't make a dent. All of the places on this map would find themselves under attack by Iranian missiles. It would be prohibitively dangerous for the U.S. Navy to try and force an opposed entry to the Gulf. Saudi oil refineries would be hit. The Iraqi embassy would probably be overrun. Kuwait and the other places we previously staged invasions would be under continuous missile and drone attack. Turkey probably wouldn't allow us to use that country as a base. Coming from the east means driving over 1,000 miles of barren desert before reaching a meaningful human settlement. Is it impossible? No, but it would be a real war requiring consistent commitment, which I think and hope even the Biden administration knows is beyond us right now. And he points to this map of the deployment of U.S. troops that I've referenced now multiple times, just how many thousands of people that we have in the region. And we got a very small glimpse of it. When you've got thousands of troops in Syria, in a country which we never declared war on, and for some reason we're continuing to have bases on, well, now they're fair game. They're very, very close to a lot of these proxies. And missiles, drones get launched at them. Same thing in the Gulf of, in Yemen with our guided missile destroyers and all those. But what he's really pointing to is the extraordinary vulnerability that a lot of our troops have, on these bases, the Baghdad embassy, the bases on Iraq, and that's just, not even to mention Bahrain, which is right there. Remember that case when, what was it, a bunch of soldiers or some sailors like drifted into Iranian water? That's how close we are to Iran every single day. We're right there, on that line of where their waters, territorial waters began and ours, we're allowed to operate in the international waters. But that just points out when you can drift into the enemy territory, then it's not that easy for them to fire at you. And this is for all the sanctions, for all the efforts that we have made to degrade the Iranian military, to degrade their capacity. What lesson can we learn from Russia is that you can do all of that and you can still mount a pretty effective military campaign and you can kill a hell of a lot of people. Now, will you win outright, as the U.S. military might? Maybe not. But you can make it very painful enough to kill tens of thousands of people, where Americans are going to be like, okay, what's actually going on here? Even in the global war on terror, we never lost the amount of troops that we likely would lose in in the first year or so of a conflict like this. America has not felt anything like this since Vietnam. It's been a long, long time. And I would say, let's try not to feel it again.
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
Indeed, absolutely. And just to underscore the level of volatility, put this up on the screen, the U.S. State Department has issued a worldwide caution alert for U.S. citizens due to Israel's war on Hamas. This again just underscores how much we are on edge. It advises U.S. citizens to exercise increased caution due to the potential for terrorist attacks, demonstrations, or violent actions against U.S. citizens and interests. The brutality of the Israeli assault on Gaza, the number of civilian casualties that we have already had before they even have begun the ground invasion has really united a lot of countries in the Arab world and throughout the broader Middle East against us. And as I was saying before, when you combine that with what they view as complete hypocrisy in terms of our stance on the Ukraine war versus how we are approaching Israel's war on Gaza, it is an incredibly tense, fraught, and dangerous situation that could spiral with one incident. I mean, I think we had a little bit of a glimpse of that with this hospital bombing and the way that instantly led to mass protests, anger, fury, not just throughout the region, but really throughout the world. And you can see how one incident could be a spark to a much broader conflagration.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely correct to note that.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.